You know that moment when your husband hands you divorce papers like he's returning a defective toaster to Target? Well, apparently Brad thought our 8-year marriage came with a satisfaction or your money back guarantee. There I was, standing in our Westchester County kitchen last Friday afternoon, still wearing my courtroom blazer from a particularly brutal real estate closing, when my darling husband of nearly a decade decided to drop his bombshell with all the finesse of a drunk frat boy at a wine tasting. "Harper, I need you to sign these," Brad announced, sliding a manila envelope across our granite countertop like he was dealing cards in Vegas. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Madison's moving in this weekend, and she needs space for her meditation corner and essential oil collection." Madison, his 25-year-old yoga instructor with the flexibility of a pretzel and apparently the moral backbone of overcooked spaghetti. I'd been watching this train wreck approach for months, but hearing it officially declared felt like getting slapped with a wet fish while someone played sad trombone music in the background. 48 hours? I repeated, opening the envelope with the kind of calm that makes emergency room nurses nervous. "That's generous of you, considering you've been planning this hostile takeover since July." Brad had the audacity to look surprised, like he'd just discovered water was wet. "You knew? Honey, you started going to yoga class 5 times a week and suddenly developed a passion for green smoothies. You're about as subtle as a marching band in a library." I flipped through the papers, my attorney brain automatically scanning for the usual amateur hour mistakes cheating husbands make when they think they're smarter than their lawyer wives. "Plus, you've been taking business trips to places that don't have business conferences. Sedona doesn't exactly scream financial advisory summit, does it? The beauty of being married to someone for 8 years is that you know exactly which buttons to push to make their left eye twitch." Brad's was doing a full cha-cha as he realized his master plan had more holes than a colander in a shooting gallery. "Look, Harper, don't make this difficult," he said, using that patronizing tone he'd perfected during our marriage counseling sessions, the ones he'd suggested right around the time Madison started posting cryptic quotes about following your bliss on Instagram. Madison and I have found something real, something authentic. She understands my spiritual journey. I nearly choked on my coffee. Brad's idea of a spiritual journey was finding the motivation to separate his darks from his lights in the laundry. This was a man who thought chakras were a type of exotic cheese and believed meditation meant thinking about golf while sitting in traffic. "Your spiritual journey," I mused, setting down my mug with deliberate precision. "Is that what we're calling it when a middle-aged financial advisor gets seduced by a woman young enough to be carded at Applebee's? Don't be bitter, Harper. It's not attractive." "Bitter? Oh, sweetie, I hadn't even started warming up yet." See, Brad made one crucial miscalculation in his grand exit strategy. He assumed that 8 years of marriage had turned me into some suburban zombie who'd collapse into tears and beg him to reconsider. What he forgot was that I'm not just any lawyer. I'm a real estate attorney who specialized in property law, and more importantly, I'm the granddaughter of Rose Caldwell, a woman who could find dirt on a saint and make them confess to jaywalking. Grandma Rose, God rest her suspicious soul, had been a private investigator for 30 years before retiring to teach me the fine art of uncovering secrets. "Knowledge is power, Harper," she used to say while teaching me to research property records and background checks. "But knowing when to use it? That's wisdom." As Brad stood there looking pleased with himself, probably mentally calculating how much younger his new girlfriend made him feel, I was already 3 steps ahead. Because while he'd been busy having his midlife crisis, I'd been doing what any self-respecting attorney does when their marriage starts smelling fishier than low tide in August. I'd been gathering intelligence. "You're absolutely right, Brad," I said with a smile that would make a shark jealous. "Madison does seem like quite the catch. Tell me, how did you two meet again?" "At the studio where she teaches those private sessions." His confidence faltered slightly, like a cell phone signal in a tunnel. "We connected on a deeper level. She sees the real me." The real him? Honey, I'd been living with the real him for 8 years. The real him left dirty socks on the bedroom floor, thought foreplay was asking if I was ready, and once got food poisoning from a gas station sushi. But sure, let's pretend his 25-year-old yoga instructor discovered his hidden depths between downward dogs and credit card swipes. Well, I'm sure she does. I agreed, gathering the divorce papers with the kind of grace that comes from years of courtroom experience. In fact, I bet she sees the real you better than you think, along with the real David Peterson, the real Michael Harrison, and the real James Mitchell. The color drained from Brad's face faster than water from a broken bathtub. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, nothing important," I said, heading toward the stairs with my papers. "Just some light reading I've been doing. You know how I love a good mystery novel, especially ones with plot twists that make you question everything you thought you knew about the characters." As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I could practically hear Brad's brain cells having a conference call trying to figure out what the hell I'd just said. The poor man probably thought I was bluffing, like when I used to threaten to hide his golf clubs if he didn't load the dishwasher properly. But unlike his pathetic attempts at household responsibility, this wasn't a negotiation. I closed the bedroom door and pulled out my laptop, the same one I'd been using for the past 3 weeks to conduct what Grandma Rose would have called due diligence on a suspicious character. Because here's the thing about being a real estate attorney married to a financial advisor. We both know how to follow money trails, but only one of us inherited a grandmother who taught her how to follow people trails. It had started innocently enough back in late September, when Brad came home smelling like sandalwood and sprouting nonsense about opening his heart chakra. Normal wives might have assumed their husband was having a standard midlife crisis, but I'm not normal wives. I'm Harper Caldwell, granddaughter of a woman who once caught a cheating spouse by tracking his dry cleaning habits for 6 months. The first red flag had been Madison's social media presence. For someone supposedly dedicated to the simple life and spiritual minimalism, she had an awful lot of expensive yoga equipment and designer athleisure wear. Her Instagram was a carefully curated museum of inspirational quotes superimposed over photos of her doing complicated poses in locations that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But the real smoking gun had been her client testimonials page on her personal website. 4 glowing reviews from devoted students who'd apparently found life-changing transformation through her specialized private sessions. David Peterson, a cardiologist from Scarsdale. Michael Harrison, who owned 3 car dealerships in Connecticut. James Mitchell, a hedge fund manager from Greenwich. And my dear husband Brad, financial advisor extraordinaire. The funny thing about rich married men having midlife crises, they're not nearly as original as they think they are. A little more digging, and by digging I mean using the investigative skills Rose had drilled into me since I was 12, revealed that Madison Rivers wasn't even Madison Rivers. Her real name was Melissa Rodriguez, and she'd been working this particular yoga instructor meets spiritual guru angle for the past 3 years across Westchester and Fairfield counties. The woman was running a rotation system that would make a baseball manager proud. Mondays and Wednesdays with David, whose wife thought he was getting cardiac rehabilitation after his heart attack. Tuesdays and Thursdays with Michael, whose spouse believed he was attending grief counseling after losing his father. Fridays with James, who'd convinced his wife he was in intensive therapy for his trading addiction. And weekends? Well, weekends belonged to Brad, who'd somehow convinced himself he was special. Each man was funding a different aspect of her lifestyle. David covered her Manhattan studio rental, the one she claimed was for advanced teacher training. Michael was paying for her car lease on that white BMW she drove to their sessions. James funded her weekend retreats to sacred energy sites that coincidentally happened to be expensive spa resorts. And Brad? Sweet, gullible Brad was covering her rent on the apartment she kept as her meditation sanctuary. The most beautiful part of her con was how she'd convinced each of them that they were saving her from the others. David thought he was rescuing her from an abusive ex-boyfriend. Michael believed he was helping her escape crushing student debt. James was under the impression he was supporting her through a difficult family situation. And Brad? Brad thought he was her knight in shining armor, swooping in to save her from the financial struggles of being a misunderstood artist. I had to admire the craftsmanship, honestly. It was like watching a master chef prepare a 5-course meal of deception, complete with garnish. The documentation I'd gathered over the past 3 weeks read like a how-to manual for modern relationship fraud. Screenshots of text conversations she was having with all 4 men simultaneously, sometimes within minutes of each other. financial records showing deposits from multiple sources into accounts under both her real and fake names. Even a detailed calendar system she kept for managing her rotation schedule, color-coded by which emotional manipulation technique worked best on each target. But here's where Melissa, made her fatal error. She got greedy. See, a smart con artist knows when to cut and run. But our girl had gotten so comfortable in her web of lies that she'd started making long-term plans, like convincing my husband to divorce me so she could move into our house. The house that, according to the property records she'd apparently never bothered to check, was owned by Caldwell Property Holdings, LLC, a company I'd established when we bought the place 6 years ago using my inheritance from Grandma Rose. The same Grandma Rose who'd taught me that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with perfect documentation and a paper trail that would make the IRS weep with joy. As I sat there in our bedroom, listening to Brad pace around downstairs, probably trying to figure out how to explain this conversation to his precious Madison, I opened my secure email account and began composing what would undoubtedly be the most satisfying group message of my entire legal career. Dear Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Harrison, Mrs. Mitchell, and future ex-Mrs. Caldwell, I typed, my fingers dancing across the keyboard like a pianist performing a particularly vicious concerto. I believe we have something in common, and I think it's time we had a conversation about Madison Rivers, also known as Melissa Rodriguez, and the educational opportunities she's been providing our husbands. The beauty of having 4 different men's wives receive identical evidence packages at exactly the same time? Well, let's just say that chaos theory has nothing on a group of wealthy, well-connected women who've just discovered they've been played by the same amateur-hour yoga instructor. I hit send on that group email at exactly 6:47 p.m. on Friday, October 13th. A timing I'm sure Grandma Rose would have appreciated for its poetic justice. Within 15 minutes, my phone started buzzing like an angry hornet trapped in a coffee can. The first call came from Patricia Peterson, David's wife, whose voice had the kind of controlled fury that comes from 23 years of marriage to a cardiologist with wandering eyes. Mrs. Caldwell, I received your email. Are you absolutely certain about these allegations? Mrs. Peterson, I'm a real estate attorney. I don't make allegations. I present evidence. Check your email again. I've included timestamps, financial records, and enough photographic proof to convince a jury of skeptics. The second call was Victoria Harrison, Michael's wife, who sounded like she was speaking through gritted teeth while possibly sharpening kitchen knives in the background. How long have you known about this Madison person? 3 weeks of active investigation, but I've been watching the situation develop for about 6 weeks. Your husband's grief counseling sessions have a very interesting pattern, Mrs. Harrison. By 7:30 p.m., I had Jennifer Mitchell on a 3-way call with the other 2 wives. And let me tell you, listening to 3 wealthy, intelligent women discover they'd been played by the same con artist was like attending a masterclass in coordinated fury. These weren't your average suburban housewives. Patricia was a former prosecutor, Victoria ran her own marketing firm, and Jennifer had an MBA from Wharton. Madison had picked the wrong group to mess with. Ladies, I said, settling into my desk chair with the satisfaction of a general addressing her troops, I propose we handle this situation with the kind of precision and thoroughness it deserves. Are you interested in a coordinated response? The enthusiasm in their voices could have powered the entire Eastern Seaboard. By 8 p.m., we had a group text chain that would make a Pentagon strategy team jealous. Patricia was handling the legal aspects. Apparently, Madison's little operation constituted fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion across state lines. Victoria was managing the social media investigation, tracking down every fake review and fabricated testimonial. Jennifer was following the money trail through banking records her hedge fund connections could access. And me? I was coordinating the whole beautiful symphony of justice while simultaneously preparing for Madison's inevitable arrival at my house. Because that was the thing Brad didn't know about his precious spiritual guru. She had a key to our house that he'd given her 3 weeks ago, and according to the tracking app I'd discreetly installed on his phone, thank you, Grandma Rose, for teaching me about digital surveillance, she was planning to surprise him with a celebration dinner tonight. At 8:45 p.m., Brad finally worked up the courage to come upstairs. I could hear him approaching like a guilty teenager trying to sneak past curfew, each step on the stairs a symphony of regret and impending doom. "Harper, are you okay up there? You've been awfully quiet." "Just packing, sweetheart," I called back, not bothering to look up from my laptop where I was reviewing the insurance fraud documents Patricia had already started preparing. You know how thorough I am with important projects. "About what you said earlier. Those names." "Oh, that? Don't worry about it, Brad. I'm sure it's nothing important. Just some coincidences I noticed while researching Madison's background. You know how paranoid lawyers can be." I could practically hear his relief through the bedroom door. Poor Brad, thinking he'd dodged a bullet when he was actually standing in front of a cannon that hadn't fired yet. At 9:20 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Social media profiles deleted across all platforms as of 10 minutes ago. Someone's running scared." Jennifer chimed in at 9:25. "Bank accounts showing unusual activity. Large cash withdrawals started an hour ago." Patricia's message at 9:30 was my personal favorite. "Filed preliminary reports with fraud divisions in 3 counties. This is going to be fun." But the real entertainment started at 9:45 p.m. when I heard a car pull into our driveway. I glanced out the bedroom window to see Madison's white BMW, the one Michael Harrison was paying for, parking behind Brad's Mercedes. She bounced out of the car carrying what looked like takeout bags from that expensive organic place in town, wearing yoga pants that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget, and a smile that could sell ice to penguins. I quickly texted the group. "The star of our show has arrived. Ladies, are you ready for the grand finale?" 3 immediate responses. "Ready. Let's do this. Time to end this charade." From downstairs, I heard the front door open and Madison's voice calling out in that breathy, pseudo-mystical tone she probably practiced in the mirror. "Brad, honey, I brought dinner. I thought we could celebrate your new freedom with some organic quinoa Buddha bowls." Buddha bowls, of course. Because nothing says "I'm going to destroy your marriage and steal your house" quite like appropriating Eastern philosophy and serving it with overpriced grain salads. I heard Brad practically tumbling down the stairs to greet her, his voice filled with the kind of guilty enthusiasm of a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar who's trying to convince everyone he was just checking if the cookies were fresh. "Madison, I told you to wait until tomorrow. She's still here." "Oh, don't worry about that," came Madison's confident reply. "After tomorrow, this will all be behind us. We can start fresh in our beautiful new home." Our beautiful new home. The audacity was almost admirable. Almost. I closed my laptop, straightened my blazer, and checked my appearance in the mirror. Time to go downstairs and introduce Madison to the concept of consequences. But first, one final text to my new favorite group chat. "Showtime, ladies. Hope you're recording this." I descended those stairs like I was walking into a courtroom where I already knew the verdict. Madison and Brad were in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around his waist while she gazed adoringly at our granite countertops like she was already redecorating in her mind. The takeout containers were spread across the island, and she'd even lit some candles, probably the expensive ones I'd bought from that boutique in Greenwich. "Well, well," I announced, my voice cutting through their romantic bubble like a knife through warm butter. "Madison Rivers, or should I say, Melissa Rodriguez." The effect was instantaneous and absolutely delicious. Madison's face went through more color changes than a traffic light having a nervous breakdown, while Brad looked like someone had just told him his 401k had been invested in Monopoly money. "Harper, what are you talking about?" Brad stammered. But Madison had gone completely rigid, her hands dropping from his waist like she'd just realized she was hugging a rattlesnake. "Oh, I think Madison knows exactly what I'm talking about," I said, pulling out my phone and setting it on the counter. "In fact, I bet she's checking her messages right about now, wondering why David Peterson's wife, Michael Harrison's wife, and Jennifer Mitchell's wife have all been trying to reach her in the past hour." Madison's phone, which had been buzzing incessantly from her purse, suddenly seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. She stared at it like it might explode, which, considering the circumstances, wasn't far from the truth. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Harper," she said, but her voice had lost that breathy, mystical quality faster than air from a punctured balloon. "Brad told me you might try to cause trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed, the sound echoing through our kitchen like a gunshot. "Honey, I haven't even started causing trouble yet. That was just the opening act." My phone rang at exactly 10:05 p.m. I answered it on speaker, because if you're going to destroy someone's life, you might as well do it with theatrical flair. "Harper, it's Patricia Peterson. I'm here with Victoria and Jennifer. We've just finished filing reports with the Fraud Division, the IRS, and the State Attorney General's office. We thought Madison might want to know." Madison's face had progressed from pale to green, landing somewhere around the color of old guacamole. Brad was looking between us like a spectator at the world's most confusing tennis match. "What fraud division?" he asked, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old boy hitting puberty. "Well, Brad," Victoria Harrison's voice came through the speaker with the kind of professional cheerfulness she probably used to deliver bad news to clients. "Your girlfriend has been running quite the operation. 4 married men, 4 different stories, 4 different revenue streams. Very entrepreneurial, really." "4 men?" Brad repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer Mitchell's voice joined in, crisp and matter-of-fact. "David thought he was helping her escape an abusive relationship. Michael believed he was covering her student loans. You thought you were supporting her through financial hardship. My husband James was convinced he was funding her spiritual retreat to heal from family trauma. She's been collecting rent money, car payments, studio fees, and vacation funds from all of you simultaneously." The sound Brad made was somewhere between a wounded animal and a broken garbage disposal. Madison, meanwhile, had grabbed her purse and was edging toward the door like a shoplifter who'd just spotted security. "Madison," I called sweetly, stopping her mid-escape, "before you go, there's one more thing you should know. This house? The one you've been planning to move into? It's owned by Caldwell Property Holdings, LLC. My LLC, bought with my inheritance, in my name, with my money. Brad's name isn't on the deed, the mortgage, or any of the legal documents." She turned around slowly, her face now resembling a wax figure that had been left too close to a heater. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means," I said, savoring every word like fine wine, "that even if Brad divorces me, he has no legal claim to this property. You've been planning to move into a house that he can't give you because he doesn't own it. You've been seducing a man for his assets when his primary asset legally belongs to his wife." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming and the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds until Madison's world completely imploded. Brad finally found his voice. "4 men? You've been seeing 4 men?" Madison's carefully constructed mystical persona crumbled faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. "Brad, I can explain." "Explain?" he exploded, his face turning red enough to stop traffic. "Explain how you've been playing me for months? Explain how everything you told me was a lie?" "Actually," Patricia's voice cut through the chaos from my phone, "she won't be explaining anything to anyone except federal investigators. We've traced financial transactions across state lines, documented identity fraud, and found evidence of tax evasion that would make Al Capone impressed. Madison, or Melissa, or whatever your real name is, you're about to become very familiar with the inside of a courtroom." Madison made one last desperate play. "Brad, honey, none of this matters. We have something special." "Special?" Victoria's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You mean like the special relationship you had with my husband every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months?" That's when Madison finally cracked completely. The tears started flowing. The mystical facade disappeared entirely, and she began babbling about how she never meant for it to go this far, how she just needed money for her sick mother, how she was going to tell everyone the truth eventually. But I was done listening. I'd heard enough lies from Madison to last several lifetimes. "Ladies," I said into the phone, "I think our work here is finished. Madison, the door is behind you. I suggest you use it before I decide to press additional charges for trespassing." Madison fled our house faster than a tourist leaving Times Square on New Year's Eve, her designer yoga pants and spiritual enlightenment retreating into the October night like smoke from an extinguished candle. The white BMW, Michael's BMW, technically, squealed out of our driveway with all the grace of a shopping cart with a broken wheel. Brad stood in our kitchen looking like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. The Buddha bowls sat congealing on the counter, their organic quinoa probably wondering how it had gotten mixed up in such a mess. 8 years, Harper, he said finally, his voice hollow as a campaign promise. 8 years of marriage? And you knew about this for weeks and didn't say anything? Oh, sweetheart, I replied, blowing out Madison's candles with deliberate ceremony. I learned a long time ago that knowledge is only powerful when you know exactly how to use it. Grandma Rose always said timing is everything in both revenge and real estate. The beautiful thing about watching someone's fantasy implode is the moment they realize they've traded something real for something completely fabricated. Brad had given up a marriage with a successful attorney who owned prime Westchester County real estate for a con artist who'd been juggling more men than a circus performer. My phone buzzed with updates from my new favorite group chat. Patricia had already spoken with a federal prosecutor who was very interested in Madison's multi-state operation. Victoria had discovered 2 additional victims in Connecticut through her social media investigation. Jennifer had traced enough financial irregularities to keep forensic accountants busy for months. The IRS is going to have a field day with this, I told Brad, scrolling through the evidence files. Turns out Madison hasn't been reporting income from her various spiritual counseling services. Amazing how quickly enlightenment disappears when tax fraud charges start flying. By Saturday morning, the consequences were spreading through our social circles like gossip at a country club board meeting. David Peterson's medical practice was scrambling to do damage control after Patricia leaked the story to her former colleagues in the prosecutor's office. Michael Harrison's car dealerships were facing awkward questions from clients who'd heard about his grief counseling sessions. James Mitchell had quietly taken a leave of absence from his hedge fund, while Jennifer consulted divorce attorneys. And Brad? Poor Brad discovered that being the 4th wheel in a con artist's rotation isn't exactly a resume booster in the financial advisory world. Word travels fast in Westchester County, especially when it involves yoga instructors, fraud investigations, and very angry wives with very good lawyers. The divorce papers Brad had so confidently served me turned out to be as worthless as Madison's promises of spiritual transformation. When you don't actually own the primary marital asset, divorce negotiations become significantly more complicated. Turns out my inheritance-funded LLC and my name on every legal document gave me negotiating power that made Brad's position about as strong as a house of cards in a hurricane. 3 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where this whole drama unfolded. But now it's just me, my coffee, and the satisfaction that comes from watching karma work with the precision of a Swiss watch. The house is mine, the peace is mine, and the future is entirely mine to design. Patricia, Victoria, Jennifer, and I still maintain our group chat, though now it's mostly for sharing wine recommendations and legal updates on Madison's case. She's currently facing charges in 3 states and owes back taxes that would make a lottery winner nervous. The yoga instructor who promised spiritual enlightenment is about to discover the meditative qualities of federal prison. Brad moved into a studio apartment in White Plains, where he's apparently trying to rebuild his client base and his dignity simultaneously. Last I heard, he'd sworn off yoga entirely and was considering taking up golf, a sport where the only thing that gets twisted is your swing. The most beautiful part of this whole mess? I didn't have to destroy anyone's life. I just had to reveal the truth and let consequences handle the rest. Madison destroyed her own life by building it on lies. Brad destroyed his own marriage by choosing fantasy over reality. I just provided the documentation. Grandma Rose always said that justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance to the universe. Sometimes that balance requires a little help from well-organized evidence files and a group of very determined wives with excellent lawyers. These days, when people ask me about my divorce, I just smile and say it was educational. I learned that 8 years of marriage taught me exactly how much I'm worth, and it's significantly more than I'd been settling for. And if any future suitors think they can play games with Harper Caldwell, well, let's just say I've got Grandma Rose's investigative skills, a law degree, and 3 new friends who know exactly how to coordinate a beautiful takedown. After all, karma might be patient, but it's got excellent credit and always collects with interest.